everybody. This is Prasant Naidu here from Lighthouse Insights. Today we have a very special guest. He's none other than CEO and co-founder of Unmetric, social media monitoring product, Lakshmanan, Narayan. We call him Lux. Hi, Lux.
Hey, hi. Lux is one of those nicknames that didn't have a derogatory meaning in college, so it kind of stuck. It's one of those non-embarrassing nicknames that I was fortunate to have. So, yeah, so I'm Lakshmanan Narayan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Unmetric, a company that started originally in India, in sunny Chennai. We grew the company. The focus was always on multiple markets with a primary focus on the US market. So most of our clients are out of the US and India. Grew the company. We have a little over 50 people back in India and over a dozen people here in the States. And at a certain stage, it made a lot more sense for me to be present here in the States. So I relocated here about 6 months back. Our headquarters are here in New York. And I divide my time between our offices here and back in Chennai. So, yeah, that's me. Interestingly, we actually started in 2010. Right, for various reasons, at that point in early 2010, I thought there was a fantastic opportunity in small business. I still think it's an interesting opportunity. And we launched a product called, the company was not the same name as a product, but the product was called Eyes and Feet. The whole idea was online eyeballs, offline footfalls for small businesses like restaurants and spas and bars and stuff. Comparative intelligence to an extent, plus actionable intelligence on the basis of which they could accelerate their own presence on Facebook, Twitter, and various things. So, launched that in the beginning of 2000, worked on that in 2010, launched it in 2010, got a fair amount of traction, got some visibility. But long story short, I figured that we had kind of addressed a pain point that, while relevant, was a bit of an overkill for the small business who wasn't as fixated about comparative intel and granular data around it as much as a large business would be. In the beginning of 2011 was when we decided that as a company, we're probably a lot better off focusing on enterprise brands and Fortune 1000 brands than on small businesses. And obviously, the granularity of product, the detailed, the depth of analysis and stuff that we offer had to change as well to reflect this changed focus. So we did, what is classically called a pivot, and we pivoted our business almost entirely in the beginning of 2011, locked ourselves up for about 6 months, built out what became Unmetric, and launched it only towards the end of 2011. Right? So at that point, the office at that point in 2011 and most of 2011 was really a spare room I had in my house. My co-founder in Chicago, my classmate from college, Joe, his dining table, and Kumar, again a classmate from college who was in Coimbatore at that time, had a slightly bigger spare room. And he had, I think, one developer working with him. We had one person working part-time. We had a designer working part-time. And it was a small team of about 5-6 people. And that's it. And we didn't have any of our offices at that point. End of 2011 was when we kind of launched the product. I was the closest person to sales at that point, and for a few months I was entirely in sales mode, signed up a few good names in India at that point, which was an interesting validation of the fact that we had built a product that people were willing to use and, more importantly, pay for. And on the strength of that initial validation, we got caught the eye of Nexus Venture Partners, amazing VCs. For anyone who's looking at raising capital, amazing guys to work with. They had a great conversation with us. They liked what we were doing and thought that, and at that, right then when they decided to invest in the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, we hadn't even entered the US market. We hadn't signed a single US client. Nevertheless, they saw potential in it, thought that they can help accelerate. That's when we raised our Series A funding. We also launched the US operations, built out a team over here. I spent a good part of 2012 in the US building out team, hiring people, understanding the lay of the land. We actually started selling here in the US only in the middle of 2012. So we've been active here for a little over a year and a half, in which time we've signed up a good number of marquee names. Everyone from Subway and Toyota and Chevrolet to a whole bunch of interesting agencies like MRY and Zocalo and M-Booth. So I'm pretty proud of what we've been able to, rather my team has been able to achieve in the last year and a half. So 2012 was really proving out the model, validating it. 2013 was all about scaling it up a little bit, and 2014 is all about operational execution. I think we've proved to ourselves in the market that we are addressing an interesting niche in the social media ecosystem. And our efforts in 2014 are going to be to scale this multifold. End of last year was also when we raised a Series B round from Jeffco Venture Partners, who also been amazing partners. So their Singapore arm invested in us, along with Nexus, who participated as well. So that fund and infusion obviously allows us to scale a lot faster and do things a lot faster and earlier than we would otherwise. So looks like it's an interesting year ahead. We've got sales efforts and marketing efforts happening in the US, in India, sporadically in markets around that are homogeneous English-speaking markets like Australia and UK as well, and Singapore is also interestingly a market of some focus for us. I think there are always variances between markets, and we are seeing that. I mean, the US market is traditionally most evolved in terms of marketing technology. That has always been the case. So typically, if you look at anything, I mean, right from websites to microsites to email marketing to search engine marketing, search engine optimization to everything that digital marketing has gone through, it's typically the US market, which is the largest homogeneous English-speaking tech buying market in the world, is a primary market. So it's not something new. Having said that, if you look at the reason we focus on the US market is twofold. I mean, one, the fact that we have a larger number of potential customers at this point in time. And as the market evolves, that number is only going to get larger. And the second is the fact that, technology as a solution is embraced a lot more over here, where there is a natural propensity to go towards a product approach as opposed to a services approach. Right. As a consequence, there is a propensity to pay for technology, pay good monies, especially since large brands and large companies have senior people tasked with social. And that typically translates into the availability of budgets for buying good, cutting-edge, leading-edge technology. Right? In fact, I think Mark Benioff put it best. He predicts that, the CEO of Salesforce.com, he predicts that in 2016, the CMO will hold and manage a larger technology budget than the CTO. Right. Right? Well, those are pretty bold words. I mean, I don't know if they're going to come true. I hope they do, but I think it's interesting as a trend that the average marketer is becoming a lot more technology savvy and has the reins of a technology budget. That's also true in India, because we've also signed up some good names in India as well. So there is a market in India. So I don't want this to be misconstrued as no, there isn't a market in India, but typically in India, the breadth of the funnel isn't as big as it is in the US. And it is increasing in both markets. So as a consequence, you will have a broader funnel happening in both places, but I think it will continue to be larger in the US. In India, I think the marketers we've signed on are the ones you classically associate with being a little ahead of the curve in terms of how they think about social and digital. I mean, brands like Coffee Day and HDFC, Standard Chartered, Micromax. I like to think that we've got some of the more forward-thinking marketers, like Club Mahindra, for example. And that the breadth of the funnel, while increasing, is not as broad as it is in the US market. Plus, the India market, the stage at where it is right now, there is a higher propensity to approach social from a services lens, which is typically, to contract with an agency or something. Nothing wrong with that. But the perspective is typically to throw people at the problem and to have more of a services mindset as opposed to a product mindset, which is changing. That there is increasingly an embracing of a services plus a product kind of an approach, which is why we've been able to sell in the Indian market. There are more brands over here that are willing to spend on social media and in technology in general. But both markets are pretty important to us. The whole ROI question is not endemic only to India. It's something that I see quite often happening here in the US as well. It's very fashionable to ask the ROI question, especially of social media and digital media. And I mean, at various levels, it's a good question to ask because you need accountability. I think, very often ROI is bracketed in the same bucket as accountability, but it's not the same thing, right? Accountability of, okay, we gave you this kind of budget, what did you achieve with it, is different from define the ROI and give me a magic number, right? At these levels, I don't think the ROI thing makes sense the way digital or social is at this point, specifically from the perspective of social. It's almost like being penny wise and pound foolish in a way, because here you are asking for ROI and strict numbers and accountability for something that is still less than 5% of your total marketing budget. Right? It just doesn't make sense considering that you never got that ROI for the bulk of the rest of your budget. I mean, there's a classic saying, right? I know that only half my advertising is working, only I don't know which half. Right? That's I think that exemplifies the state of ROI in mass media. And if that is indeed the case, I mean, it's a little presumptuous to ask for so much more accountability out of social media. But people do ask that very simply because social media and digital media have so many numbers and metrics around them that the natural assumption is that you can extrapolate variable 1, 2, 3 to come up with an ROI. I mean, how difficult can that be? And the answer is actually it's very difficult, right? The other problem with ROI is a term that I have is that, I'm actually trained as a mechanical engineer. I did my undergraduate in mechanical engineering, and ROI is actually something from production engineering, right? ROI is actually a term that came in from a return on literal investment, where the investment was on fixed assets in terms of plant and land and machinery, plus variable costs in terms of salaries of people and running cost of equipment, and all that translated into product that generated a return. When you ask for ROI on a single thin slice like social, you're effectively saying, what is the ROI of that lathe operator sitting on, workshop number 3 on line number 4? It doesn't work that way. You don't have the ROI of variable costs. So I think the way we've just taken that whole term and actually, if you look at it historically, marketing loves to borrow from warfare and production engineering and things like that. But I think ROI is one of those things which is wrongly borrowed. And just one last point on that. I mean, all the great examples that we keep touting in social, from the, the Old Spice YouTube campaign to the to Subway's current campaign around January to if you look at Oreo's Dunk in the Dark thing that they did around Super Bowl that I've seen about 50 times in different presentations across, I don't think all these things originated from an ROI perspective or an ROI lens of thinking through things. I mean, to some extent, it's difficult to place that kind of onus on the way social is right now. Right? I think it's just wasted time and effort at this point focusing too much on the ROI equation. Invest in communicating through social, a lot of the numbers naturally play out themselves. I think sometimes brands are getting a little ahead of themselves in terms of trying to define rationalization and things when it's really difficult or not required. So I hope you're right in terms of it going to grow, and I think it is too. I mean, it's a natural scheme of things and evolution that it should happen. I mean, for us, I can tell you from being on the ground here that we're finding it a lot easier to have a conversation today than we had a year ago, which is an indication of the fact that there is a higher level of sophistication. There is a higher level of embracing of analytics as a solution to various things, right? Interestingly, I mean, the whole social analytics thing just exploded too fast and too soon and with too many players, right? There are more than about 250 companies that play in the analytics space, and naturally, as a consequence, it's very difficult for a marketer to make sense of what's happening. So the natural reaction, and quite understandably, is that of confusion and a tendency to assume that almost everyone is kind of intersecting with each other. Right? So as a company, we find that as a big challenge. I mean, walking into the room, most people assume, for example, that we are a listening solution, that we compete with the likes of a Radian 6 or a Buzzmetric or a Crimson Hexagon or a whole bunch of about 150 other companies that focus on ORM and this thing. And the truth is we're not. We don't do any of those things. And those companies do an awesome job of it. Neither are we like a Buddy Media or a Sprinkler or a Spreadfast or a Vitru, which are engagement solutions that help you have conversations. So right off the bat, the challenge for us as a company is often to clarify the fact that we are addressing a different niche within social. And I think that's one thing I'd love to see in the evolution, which is those lines between different solutions becoming clearer in the head of marketers. I mean, from where I sit, from our perspective, there are three very distinct buckets of solutions that have always existed in marketing, right? One bucket that tells you what your audience feels, does and stuff like that, which is there in mass media marketing as well in terms of unaided brand awareness, ad awareness, preference scores and things. In social media, the equivalent for that is really what listening solutions are all about. Right? The second bucket is one that allows you to execute. In mass media, you used to have ad planning software. In social media, you have things like Sprinkler, Spreadfast, Buddy Media, and Vitru that allow you to have conversations at scale. In mass media, you had a third bucket, which used to tell you what your competition does, because that was an input variable for you to plan what you need to do with your own brand. And that was comparative intelligence in terms of, what competition is doing in terms of television spots, in terms of print ads, in terms of general communicating. And that's really the bucket we are addressing in social by giving comparative intelligence on what other brands are doing. The big difference is that in the mass media era, everything was a monologue. Right? Brands were broadcasting to consumers, and there wasn't a feedback loop or a return loop in terms of consumers talking to brands. At best, you had a toll-free number that you were encouraged to call if you had a problem with the product, and the truth is nobody called those numbers. Right? In social, suddenly it's a conversation economy where a brand is talking, someone is responding, the brand is talking back, and obviously when you're trying to capture layers of analytics around conversation as opposed to a monologue, it's going to get a lot more complicated. It's going to get a lot more granular. And that's where the opportunity is. Right? So I think this basic division of the fact that there are buckets that brands need to do, the fact that it's not just about the tools, but what they do about them, the fact that more brands are going to embrace the fact that they need a toolkit to be a lot more efficient and accomplish a lot more with fewer people is simply the nature of evolution of the market. And I think we're going to see that happening quite rapidly in 2014. And as a consequence, a faster adoption of technologies like ours. And hopefully it should translate into, a lot more adoption, a lot more clients, a lot more revenues, and a lot more sophistication in general in social media marketing.
Thank you, Lux. Thanks for your
This was fun, man. Thank you.